Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Reverend Tammy Patzer, and I'm really excited about this episode of Expert Profiles, Conversations with Influencers and Innovators, because I'm speaking with Dr. Stephen Hobbs. And if you're 50 or older, you really want to listen in. And I know we don't look it, but I guess I know I'm running a little older than the 50 crowd now. And I still remember when I got, before I turned 50, that AARP notice. They start bugging you about it like 2 years in advance. And then all of a sudden I was there. And then I remember the first time I was able to get the senior menu at Denny's. I was just shocked. I'm still shocked. Or when they say, oh, do you qualify for the 50 and fabulous discount? But anyway, I digress. But Dr. Stephen Hobbs is an eco-creator, nature-informed entrepreneur, facilitative mentor, writer, and philanthropist for children and trees. And he's really committed to supporting that 55-year young people, because I can guarantee you, I know I'm not old, and I am definitely over 50. And he helps all of us make that transition for the next 50. And thinking about it, that's kind of reality. My dad lived to be 93, and he was still going strong if he hadn't have had a stroke. So, and I know that the reality is that we're going to all be living longer because we just have better healthcare and better mental outlook. And he wants everybody to experience gratitude, presence, inspiration, enthusiasm, and certainty so that they can live that legacy. And that's what our primary conversation is going to be about tonight, is the legacy that each person, each one of us, we all have a legacy to leave behind in the world. So I really want to dig into that. And his credentials are just crazy, outrageous, wonderful. He has worked on 6 of the 7 continents and is getting ready to do the 7th. He also has published 15 books for academic level book chapters, magazine articles, blog posts, and of course, he's developed and delivered more than 500 workshops and online courses. And he writes, he instructs, and he also has YouTube channels. So I could just go on and on with all the praises of Dr. Stephen Hobbs, but I really want you to have a chance to talk. So tell me a little bit more about, what do you mean when you're talking about someone's legacy?
The definition of legacy that I use is one that I created, and it goes as follows. Legacy is about the useful whats that you gift others so that they can learn something from your lived experience. So let me just go back. The useful whats is your time, effort, and money. How are you putting your time into play? How are you putting your effort into play? How are you putting your money into play? And the time given, sometimes that's what people are looking for, and that's what they remember. The effort that you put into something, and you did a little bit more and a little bit more, or you did what was necessary at the moment. And then the money, anything from that plaque on the park bench that you sit on, watch the sunrise and sunset, through to, okay, maybe it's a hospital wing. That could be the time, effort, and money. But the key here is that you gift others. And I think a gift comes from the heart, give comes from the head. So it's more of a purposeful way of interacting with others so that they can learn something from your lived experience. And we all have these great lived experiences that others can tap into. And that's what I'm bringing forward from a legacy, is how do you want to put that time, effort, and money in a way that people can learn from you so that you can share your lived experience. What a great way to live.
That really is a great way to live. And right now, I've been gifting time and attention to my little grandbabies. And who gets it's one of those win-win-win situations, because I really benefit from being able to love these little infants. You know, they're a year, 4 months to almost a year and a half. And they, of course, enjoy that interaction with grandma, who's totally different than their parents. And then, of course, it frees up the energy for their parents to go off to work and not worry that, you know, when they come home, their child is going to be there waiting for them. So that's, you know, and that's just one little instance of that. But when you work with people, what types of legacies are there besides like my gift of, I guess, love or childcare, whatever, however I want to reference that?
I'll just give a couple. One might be the grandparent who introduces the grandkids to nature. And remember, you introduced me as a nature-informed entrepreneur. So I've done lots and lots of work with the outdoors, trees in particular. And I have been writing, and I'm going to be writing more children-related books that grandparents can use with the grandkids, and the grandkids can use with the grandparents. So there's a legacy of that time and effort, reading the books, go exploring, and it doesn't really cost a lot of money. So that's one example. Another example might be is that you're really interested in the Great Green Wall of Africa. And it's a tree planting program. You'll notice a thread with me with trees. It's a tree planting program that is to stop the desertification in Africa. And there's lots of things that can be done there, like running a local chapter to raise money to be able to plant the trees. There could be a legacy. And then how do you involve the family? How do you involve your friends? How do you involve your community? So there's another legacy story that goes out. But you know what? Sometimes it's the legacy of writing your memoir, or what I would call your autobiography. Rather than someone writing your biography, why don't you write your own biography, the autobiography, and share that with the family? That can be a wonderful legacy. That's something that in my family, like I never met my grandparents, right? And I'm not going to be a grandparent. And so that notion of the familial history, I don't have it. I don't know what it's about. So it would have been great, someone along those lines, maybe someone in my family had written. That could be a legacy that you could work with.
Oh, I really like that, because it's funny that you bring that up, because I wish that my father would have written some of the stories, but I mean, he did tell us stories about his mother and his father, and a little bit about his grandma and everything. And the truth is, even though he told those stories, he didn't write them down. And the same with on my mother's side. My mother did write some of her information down. And when you go back and read it, what you find out is a lot more about the personal struggles and thoughts and what their hopes and dreams were. And you can also feel that family energy that seems to come through. But back to the trees, when you brought that up, I was thinking about, I spent a good part of today playing with my little granddaughter, and I have rocks. I like rocks. So I was just showing her all the rocks, and she was, you know, playing with the different rocks, and she liked the way they sounded when we put them into this brass bowl. But every time she sees me, she doesn't speak very clearly, but she's able to communicate to say, I want to play with the rocks. And because she'll point and go, you know, and I'll go, oh, you want to play with the rocks? And so I bring out the rocks and we play with them. But the same with trees and nature. It's such a, there's something about trees. I agree with you, because we need trees. We
Yes.
need them, that we have that symbiotic relationship with them, because we provide them what they need, they provide us with what we need. And that sounds wonderful, what the what's going on in Africa. So are the projects, your legacy projects, are they typically, like you said, related to children and trees?
There is a thread there. One of the things that I realized was that there are places in the world where there are no trees in the schoolyard. I've been there. I've been to some of these places. And it struck me as, well, hang on a minute, why couldn't we plant some trees where the kids could do their reading, writing, arithmetic underneath the trees rather than in the school or having to go somewhere else? What kind of ecology could we build around the school? And in today's world, there's a lot of schoolyard conversations that are going on. And because a lot of the kids are going outdoors more than staying indoors. And so this notion of trees has always been there. And I have 5 major projects that I'm involved with. And there's trees in it somewhere.
Do you want to expand on one or two of those projects of what they involve?
Certainly. The big one, I'll put it with my thumb, so I'll use my hand here. So the thumb one, I'm supporting the funding of eco-regions and smart cities around the world. That's part of my job. And in there, obviously, is the trees and how does one work with the trees and the plants and agroforestry and all that. So I'm supporting people bringing projects to me. I'm helping them to work through the paperwork to apply for funding. So that's one of my jobs. The next one down is I'm actually working on one particular eco-region, and it's in Kenya, and it's to help someone who is attempting to educate the counties, communities in his region about agroforestry, the use of forests and plants for food and soil regeneration and water and how this all plays itself out. So I'm helping him to raise funds for his particular project as well. And I'm doing that through my own business as well. So those are the 2 up here. There's 3 others, but those are the 2 up here. So.
Wow, that's really interesting, because I mean, you know, one of the reasons why I do these interviews is to get an insight that unless you talk to people and ask them what they're doing, you don't have any idea that there's projects out there that if you know, are aware and want to be a part of, you know, relate, like trees. Locally, there was a woman who, her big project, it was called People for Trees. And they were a big part of making sure that a city, as it was growing and expanding, that it included trees in its communities, and they actually made sure that in the city planning that green spaces and trees and different efforts were made to make sure that there were native trees being planted or replanted, because often they'll go in and just bulldoze everything down and destroy, you know, these 100-year-old oak trees or all of these trees that should not be destroyed. So that's very interesting. You also ask a question, and it was funny because before our interview, I actually asked you, is this a typo? And the question is, whole is it? Can you tell me what whole is it refers to?
Most certainly. When the 5 questions are asked, like the 5 W's and H, which we tend to always work with, I looked at the why question in particular, and I said, great, why? It sort of was hinting at why now, in the now, why am I doing what am I doing? And I went, well, hang on a minute. There is a future consideration called intention. And whole is to get that understanding of the intention and bringing that intention into the present. Because what it does is it gives you the sense of fitness of whatever you're doing. Not necessarily the physical aspect as we associate, but fitness in the sense of what does it lead to. So if someone was doing that project of trees and cities, trees and people, there would be a sense of whole is it. Well, whole is it might be we want to plant so many trees, and we want to bring what that means and looks like and the wording and bring it into the present rather than why are we planting these trees? Yeah, it doesn't have the same ring to it as whole is it. Whole is the planting of the trees, the holistic view of it. So what I was doing is pushing and pulling and tickling and whatever to get out into that intention and be very clear and bring that back in a sense. So I'm in it now, in my today.
So because trees often, what is the saying? When is the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago, right? And I guess the second best time would be today. So am I understanding that as you look at your intention, which is to make sure that there are trees in the future for other people who are not yet born, but you're bringing it back into the now, and because if you're acting in the now, you're making a difference into the future?
Correct.
Is that?
Yeah, well, we have a sense of when we're in the present, we move forward. If we bring something of the future and bring it into the present, we're moving fromward. From the future, it's a slightly different languaging. I get that. Sometimes I make up words. But what I'm attempting to do is to think through the sense of that future today. And you made a great point around those trees that are native to the area, because sometimes what we do in cities is we'll plant ornamental trees from other parts of the world. They might look great, but they may actually pose problems for the nature, the natural trees that are around. And if we're thinking about the future, what our cities want to be like, is it better, and this is something someone would ask is it better to plant the natural trees of the area, those that are native, or do we bring in another kind of forest into our cities? Because sometimes those trees don't get along well, or it takes them 300 years to get along with each other, or else they'll butt up against each other. And these are the whole is it kind of questions you want to ask yourself. So a great example, I think. So.
I think that is a good example. I know locally, I live in Southwest Florida. We have a lot of what they call invasive species. For example, Australian pines were brought over because they drank a lot of water. And so they were trying to dry up certain areas, and they make a really good windbreak and they grow really fast. But they also, I guess the pine needles drop and they create a lot of acidity in the soil, which then kills off the native ground cover and also takes away the food for the native animals. So it is interesting how we have learned about trying to look at, what is the real impact of some of these plants and everything, that maybe it was a good idea at the time, or it was pretty, or whatever the reasoning is. But I think now, especially here in Florida, it's all about looking at the native plants and the native, like butterflies, for example. If you don't have the right plants, you're not going to have butterflies, they'll die. And that's a really good issue. You also talk about living your legacy that you intend to leave. And what does living from your legacy or living in your legacy mean?
Again, there is a view of your legacy that you are going to, in a sense, lasso and bring into your life. So to live from that legacy, that view of what it is, that intention that you're going to bring into your present so that you can pay attention to it. And living from that always gives you that sense of there's something there that guides me in moving forward. And I make it a little bit different than purpose and mission, okay? Purpose is that there's something that's not in your life right now and you want to get it into your life, which is a little bit legacy, remember, is something you're going to gift others so they can learn something
Right.
from you. Your purpose may not be something you're necessarily going to share with others. One would hope that, because we educate what we love to learn. That's a way of doing it, right? Whereas mission is like in an organization, what's missing in the community that you provide? What is it that you are sharing? What is it you're creating? So the legacy is really the story and contributions that you want to gift others. And you want to live from that and bring that view into your present. And therefore, it goes with the phrase, live from your legacy you intend to leave.
Okay, so live from the legacy you intend to leave. Because you're right about the languaging, because you do use a lot of words or terms that I think they're very thought-provoking. So you have to stop and kind of think about what does that mean? Because most of us we've heard purpose, we've heard mission, we've heard message, but I don't know that that we often hear about, like what you're saying about how you look into the future to see how this is going to affect and then to pull it back into what you're doing right now. So there are different branches and tenants and forces of legacy. Can you talk about those with me, please?
Certainly. The branches are just ways in which to, I'll use the word compartmentalize, bring some certain things together to look at around legacy. So the first one is legacy in life. So do you want to have a legacy with your life? Do you want to have a life that has a legacy associated with it? And what does it mean to live an extraordinary life? Because one can live a remarkable life or a memorable life, but I'm saying, well, let's live an extraordinary life and let's weave legacy into that, all right? Another one is legacy leadership, in this whole sense of being able to lead others and to be alert to using the words of others because you'll touch their heart rather than lead using your words because the best you'll do is touch their head, okay? So legacy and leadership. And that is really important for those who are in transition in the workplace at the moment. And what might you do with your lived experience because of what you have done from a working perspective? And that there's lots and lots and lots of opportunities there. Then there's, I'll call it the legacy and legal aspects about wills and living wills and being very clear about what you want to leave who and all that. But here's one that struck me a couple of years ago when I learned about it, and I thought I would share it, is what do you want to do with your Facebook page or your Facebook profile? There is a way in Facebook that you can turn over or turn off. Someone else has to do it if you transition out of the earth too quick and you don't do it yourself. There's things like that. Sometimes we don't think about it, right? I think there was some statistic there. I don't know when it's going to happen. It sort of escaped me at the moment, but there'll be more dead people on Facebook than live people.
Makes sense, because there is a feature that I think they ask you, what do you want to do with your account? Like, do you want it to close down? And I know that often people who don't have any notification, sometimes people think they're still alive, and then they get themselves in trouble by saying something.
Yes.
And then somebody will say, oh, by the way, didn't you know? And my sister, my father passed away, and my sister is, I guess, in charge of his Facebook, and it's still open, but every now and then I can tell that somebody doesn't know that he's no longer alive because of what they say. But that is interesting. And what you were saying about what's going on right now with people and their work, and so many people here we are going on what, 1 year and 3/4, almost 2 years of this COVID pandemic situation. And all of the things that they're going, that people are quitting their jobs and I don't know what they're doing to make money, but the more people are quitting their jobs, and we were forced to stay home for a while, and rethinking their entire work lives.
Yes.
And so I can understand that. How do you work with people who are trying to figure all this stuff out?
Well, there's a process that I have created that one can go through, and it's actually the legacy tenets. So why don't I share those with you? The 5 tenets are values, challenges, project, stories, and contributions. So the values is, what is it that you value? Remember the useful what's that you want to give? What do you value? What do you want to share with people? What do you need to share with people? What do you desire to share with people? It's an expression of your values. Because if you're not going to work with your values, then you probably won't do anything, because your hierarchy of values will come into play. So you have to be alert to that. The next is the challenges. It's great to think about a legacy, but what might be the challenges that are there? And I think of the challenges as being what hinders and what helps. Okay, some people will say, well, what do I want to increase? What do I want to decrease? There's lots of different ways to express that. But the next one is to actually get into a project. What is something that you would enjoy doing, and do it to enjoy it, and to really be alert to it and finding out. And that's where I help people understand, do you want to do it locally, or do you want to go out there for the world, right? And figure out what you want to do with them. Then there's the stories aspect, because if you're going to do a project, guess what? It's kind of difficult to do it by yourself.
Right.
Because you've got something called a family that is going to interact with you anyway, because of what it is that you're gifting out. And therefore, how are you going to then share what you know and do in a story form? And you made that, with your dad, sharing stories and that, and the importance of stories. And then obviously the contribution is actually, as you contribute, you're going to have to determine, do I want to improve this, focus this, or strengthen this? Because I think I'm going to stop doing that. I'm going to start doing this. So those are like the 5 main tenets. And that's what I work someone through, so that you're really clear about what is this gift that you're wanting to share, so people can learn from your lived experience.
Wow, that is really interesting. So then what would you say then for someone who works for you then would be their big transformation? What would they walk out of this relationship with you? What would they end up having?
Well, I'll use one thought line. The realization that as you move out of your workplace, and if you're 55 plus years young, So you're looking at the 60 years young door or the 65 years young door, and you want to go through those doors without it clipping you in the back of the butt, right, when you go through. What is it that maybe you know about that your lived experience from the workplace, you can transition it with you so that you can gift it so people can learn from it. So one of the things that I encourage people to do is actually become mentors. In particular, become elder mentors. Instead of calling yourself older, call yourself elder. Take the O out, put the E in, and become an elder mentor. Now, I'm not taking on the First Nations Indigenous world of elder. I'm not taking on religious churches' use of elder. I'm just using it as I self-declare I'm at a point, I'm an elder, not an older. I have something I can offer. Maybe I can do it as a mentor. I have 3 other ways. May I share those?
Yes, I'd love to hear more.
One is a celebrant. How is it that you can set up celebrations because of what you've gone through, even like how to celebrate youngsters moving through different ages of different events, and the celebrations within families, celebrations within communities. Sometimes we don't do that. We tend to we butt heads, but we don't get together to celebrate. The next one is weaver. How to create a community of significant care, a community of it. Because you can get together with people and create a community of practice. In other words, we do things, we plant the trees, we build the houses. Those are practices. But to get together and up that game of significant care. And then there's eco-creation. And that's one where, hey, it's time to pay attention to what's going on with the planet. So if I'm going to be for the world, how can I be with the planet? And to be able to create and bring eco concepts, nature-informed activities into your life.
Wow, there is so much. Because, I mean, when you said that about the eco, I mean, you can think about, I mean, if you look at the United States in terms of how small it is in comparison to the whole planet, you know, it really isn't that huge. It just, we think we're the center of it all. But just in our own little space, you know, you have the wildfires, you have, I went to Alaska and they're losing all the trees to it was a moth or a beetle. But we were driving along and all of a sudden you would just see like, it looked like, you know, dead. It was dead forest and it was massive. And at first, you know, I thought, oh, maybe they had a fire. But no, it turned out it was this invasive moth or beetle that literally eats up the trees. And then they just go from tree to tree to tree. And it's killing all of, you know, Alaska is massive, but just all of these forests are being devastated. And then like you were saying about in Africa, and I mean, you know, in our own country, there's just so much to do. You know, water is an issue no matter where you're at, having safe, drinkable water. And I have a friend who she donates the water containers with the filters to children in Africa because they have such a, you know, a water issue. But if you just think about it, no matter where you're at, you could start locally. And then if you have the passion to go out beyond, but you literally could just start in your own backyard. I think that is actually literal because you could, whatever's going on in your own yard, you could make sure, like, for example, that you have the right types of plants that feed the native insects and the bees and all of that. Bees, that's another issue. I mean, I can start thinking, well, I think that's really interesting how you can go through the values and help somebody to hone in to see, what their legacy might be. Because I think a lot of times when people think of a legacy, they only think about how much money they leave behind. And everything that you're talking about isn't even about money as being the legacy.
It's one aspect of this sense of currency. Like if you play with the word currency, there's a money aspect to it. There's a time aspect of currency, what's current today, and an effort, what's current effort necessary to do something right now. So legacy is really your currency of living.
Wow. Yeah, as you can probably see, I've got the smoke coming out of my head, and I'm going, I have all this information that I'm processing, and I'm sure everybody listening is having the same reaction, because I'm going, well, should I do this? Should I do this? And all of the values and all of the different things, and trying to mash up, like the currency of it all, the currency, and the currency, it's very interesting. So if somebody wants to reach out to you and make contact, what's the best way?
The best way is my website, wealthmovement.com. Wealth is spelled WELLLTH, movement.com. Wealth stands for well-being and well-living to the nth degree. And it was a play on the word wealth that has the A in it. And I've had it for many years because I realized that that was my word for the world. Wealth was my word for the world. Trees is my word with the planet. Trees is my word with the planet, okay? And so that's the best way. There's a contact form there. If you want to, you can book a time to have a conversation, and we can explore a little bit about what you're going on. But that is the quickest way to get to me. Use the contact form on the website because it comes through my email, and I'm an email kind of guy.
Okay, well, that's always good to know, because some people, it is amazing how many people they'll reach out in a way that is not like, it's not your ideal way to talk to somebody, and then they get disappointed when you say, I have to have an appointment because I have to be able to focus when I talk to people. Because if I don't, I can't pay attention. There's too much other stuff going on. So what would you like to leave our audience with as a thought for them to, beyond everything else they're processing, that they should be really thinking about right now?
It's two phrases that are linked together. And the first phrase is, when you listen, you learn. So when you listen with the two ears, and it's the ability to learn. Okay, so when you listen, you learn. The complementary aspect to that is, where you share, you educate. So wherever you are, and when you start to share with someone, you are educating them about yourself and whatever it is that you're sharing. When you're listening, you're learning. In other words, taking it in. So here's a quick way to remember. When you listen, you learn is pay attention to who influences you. When you are in where you share, you educate, you influence who, just flipping it around. And I brought it up because of the word influencers in the posters, is that we have to pay attention to who influences me. You have to have who's influencing me, and I'm influencing who. Because I'm listening to it, but also when I speak, I share, I show up, I'm educating.
Right. I really agree, because listening is so vital, and often we don't listen enough. And a lot of times we don't realize who is listening to us. and it is amazing that you need to pay attention to both, like exactly what you said, who are you listening to and who is listening to you, because it does, we are influencing people all the time. And let's hope that we're positive influence. So Dr. Stephen Hobbs, thank you so much for being a guest on Expert Profiles, Conversations with Influencers and Innovators. And everyone, go to his website. And can you repeat that for me again, please?
Wealth, WELLTH movement, wealthmovement.com.
Okay, so I'm going to make sure that I have a hot link in my show notes. Everyone, this is Dr. Stephen Hobbs and Dr. Reverend Tammy Patzer. Go make it a beautiful day.